For a long time now, I wanted to have a look for myself at ReactOS. If you haven't heard of it before, I don't blame you, as it is quite an obscure one. To put it shortly, ReactOS is an operating system which tries to offer the functionality of Windows, being compatible with not only its software but also with Windows drivers. So basically a clone of Microsoft Windows. By looking at some screenshots, you might notice that the default interface looks pretty much like what you would see in Windows 95 or 98, and even the layouts of menus are made to be really similar. But looks here don't matter all that much. Instead, what we should have a look at is what it can actually do. Their current goal seems to be to match up to Microsoft Server 2003, so I want to firstly set up a whole actual machine with it and see how far that takes us. Now, it turns out that the hardware support is not that great in ReactOS, and I didn't quite realize that at first, so let me take you through this journey. First step was easy, just getting the installation media for it. For this we can actually go on their website, and while there is a big green download button there, we actually want to go for the nightly builds. These will give us access to the latest features. From here we have two options, Live CD for testing it out and running it directly from a disk or flash drive, or Boot CD for actually installing it on our hardware. I went straight for the install and I'll figure things out as I go. For this the process is simple, we just extract the ISO file from the archive and use a program like Rufus to flash it onto a thumb drive. We can then insert it into our computer of choice and install it from there. Speaking of which, let's see what our hardware is. Since this is supposed to be about on par with Microsoft Server 2003, I initially thought that having stuff supported by Windows XP would be enough, so let's see how that attempt went. I went on installing it on a simple machine with what is pretty much a core-to-quad processor and immediately ran into a bit of a dilemma. During the install, we get a prompt to select whether the computer is a single core or multi-core one, and since we have 4 of those, I just chose multiprocessor. I continued with the other steps like formatting my drive and installing the bootloader, and that seemed to go alright. But then after the restart we were just boot looping and eventually got a blue screen. I immediately suspected that one option to be the culprit since it wasn't the default, so I had to start over. This time I actually went for the defaults including the uniprocessor setting, and we actually managed to get to the next step. This was just a quick setup and soon after we got to our desktop, but with only the keyboard seeming to function. Upon looking into it later, it turns out that multiprocessor is still quite bad on ReactOS. This unfortunately means that the one core is all we can use, and our performance is reduced to effectively 1/4 of what we would expect normally from this chip. Anyway, I ended up transferring some drivers over and managed to install the chipset and networking ones just fine. I ran the setup files just like I would on Windows and it was actually quite surreal to see it running on here. One reboot later and we're doing better, with functional Ethernet and a cursor that can be moved, just a bit glitchy looking. At this point it seemed like we only really needed some graphics drivers to get going. I went on Nvidia's website and downloaded the last Windows XP driver that is compatible with my GT440. When I went to install it though, it skipped every step and threw out errors at me. After looking a bit through the other folders from around the setup.exe, I found out that each driver has its own folder. After this, what I did was go straight into the control panel and update it from there. I just had to select the folder of the display driver. That worked and some parts of the interface were a bit glitchy, but it was otherwise installed correctly. So we're good to go, right? Long story short, we were not. After experiencing lots of crashing, I thought it might just be better to play it safe and do it over with some more appropriate hardware. So that is what I did. I just looked through my stuff and tried to put together something that should be better supported, and thankfully I found just the thing. In fact, I can find drivers for the GPU and the audio straight in the built-in software manager, which I would count as a good sign. So this is it. Just some random Celeron, 768MB of DDR memory and an AGP graphics card, a GeForce 5200 to be exact. This has to work. It has to. And you know what? It did work at first. Install went well, the mouse was even working out of the box, making it easy to set things up with the drivers we need, those being Ethernet, audio and GPU. Even though online there was a newer version of the graphics drivers, I stuck to the one offered in the software manager, hoping that it would give me a better chance of it all working. Those installed no problem, and now we are back to what seems to be a well set up system. So let's have a look around and get to actually experience this operating system. First thing I took a look at was the properties menu because they made it really similar to the one in Windows XP, and I just want to have a quick look at the two included screensavers. I selected the 3D text one and right away got a blue screen. Alright, maybe it's just a coincidence, Stuff isn't always stable, so I tried it again, and well, crash. Blue screen. That was precisely the moment when I realized that I must have made some mistake along the way. This was really specific behavior and was easy to reproduce, but what would the cause of it even be? I was already starting to think about troubleshooting everything. I was ready to try another AGP graphics card, try other RAM sticks, processor, anything. Thankfully, before doing any of that, I came to a sudden realization. All this time I had been using an SSD for storage, since it's nice and quick and well, it seemed to not cause any obvious issues. However, I just had to make sure it was okay. I took it out and replaced it with a nice old IDE drive. Basic, but should be well supported. So I went in, redid the setup on there, drivers and all that, and upon trying to run the screensaver, it worked. The issue was that our SSD was somehow causing problems when trying to run a 3D application. I have no idea how that works exactly, but glad I found out the cause now. This was also the most excited I had ever been to see just some random spinning text. ReactOS does rock indeed. Well, alright, it seems that now we have a functional system just without sound. That turns out is quite a common issue, so we will ignore it. Now the question is, what do we do with this computer? The first thing that came to my mind was for me to just run some games. I find them to be a good way of showcasing the performance, and they should really give us a good idea of what we can expect in terms of supported software. Because realistically, if these run well, then any other software should also do alright. So I got a bunch of them, just trying to go for ones that were big in the Windows XP days and see if they did well or not on here. However, I won't keep the suspense up here. The ones that I picked just did not work at all. I tried Half-Life, Counter-Strike 1.6 and Source, and they all gave similar errors relating to kernel 32.dll. Then GTA 3 which didn't start, and while I have no video of it, neither did Vice City or San Andreas. That one just complained about the lack of sound, but I suspect the situation would be similar. Next, I also tried Star Wars Battlefront and Need for Speed Most Wanted, which didn't run. Finally, I tried Far Cry, which is supposed to run, be it with some glitches according to a page on the ReactOS site, but for me it just crashed silently. There are a few things that can run though. I got Space Cadet Pinball from Windows XP and that runs perfectly at least, and that's a game. I also found a fair few games on that software manager I mentioned, one of which was Chicken Invaders, and it ran perfectly fine, no complaints there. They also had a shareware version of Diablo 2, which also ran well for me, but I haven't played it before, so I just walked around a bit, knocked out a skeleton, and that was neat. So alright, our gaming options are extremely limited on this OS. So what do we even do with this computer? Unfortunately, this configuration is really old, so not like we can do much web browsing, but I did load up YouTube just for fun. I did it on the Eclipse Lunar browser that I found in the software installer. I guess it has hardware accelerated decoding, but I'm still quite shocked that it can actually play YouTube at all. And honestly, not in the lowest resolution and didn't even stutter much. However, the irony here is that the rest of the page could not load, and the video controls were not responsive outside of using keyboard shortcuts. I guess now is the time to kind of look at this and see what we got out of it. Now that we got to this point, we should probably look back at everything and draw some conclusions. I found this to be quite an unstable experience, part of which was caused by user error, but even outside of that there were a few annoyances. For example, one thing I mentioned earlier is that I had times when either a USB thumb drive or a Red Dragon mouse I tried using were causing the OS to blue screen when starting it up. Also, I experienced graphical glitches in menus, especially on other themes than the classic one, and this was the case on both systems that I tried. However, this software is in alpha, and they make no attempt to hide it, so these kinds of issues are just part for the course. I still find it really cool and impressive that this even exists at all, and that it got to the point where it can actually resemble Windows just by reverse engineering it. When it comes to practical applications for this, those might be quite limited, but as long as this evolves, I could see it being more akin to an open source replacement for Windows XP, as opposed to a modern OS one with daily drive. So this was it. Thank you for making it this far, and I would encourage you to subscribe if you want to see more videos like these. Until the next time, see ya.